Hello, this is Marvelous Magpie 85, and I'm here to discuss my favorite, the fan favorites. Well, two fan favorites. Something that I just am baffled about. Because this is actually something that I'm complaining with old Marvel about. And that is, why did they drop Scott and Sinister's relationship? And before you guys think that this is a whole ship thing, I'm not a rabid fangirl, and also this is that'd be gross. That'd be really, really gross. It's I just bringing it up, but unfortunately, relationship has gone to the point where people hear it and they presume that I'm meaning something romantic. No, I'm meaning Sinister raised Scott. Sinister raised Scott since he was like maybe 9 and his mutation activated. He's the one who made his glasses. He's the one who... And so Hank had to reverse engineer to make the visor. And they've had a few interactions. But, like, besides something like this particular one here, and one point in Modern Time Brubaker, and I admit I might not have read enough comics to know if they fully explored this, but it seems like they just had Scott drop every single little thing with Sinister. And that just makes no sense. Because Sinister's his villain daddy. Like, he took care of Scott for the longest time. And Scott may not remember most of it. Like, they pretended that he remembered everything. And in theory, Jean went through and brought everything up. But I doubt that he actually remembers everything. But look, when you look at this picture here, this was when, this particular point is when Strife, it's complicated, but Strife made a deal for genetic material of Jean and Scott. In return, he was supposed to give Sinister Future Summer's DNA. The only problem was it was actually the legacy virus. And Sinister doesn't particularly like that. So he actually came to Scott about it. And he was discussing, matter of fact, calmly. Now, one of the main things that I've discussed with my friend, we agreed to disagree on some things, is that Sinister is one of the most reasonable villains to deal with. You can't predict what he'll do. But you know that it won't be out of nowhere. You know that he's going to do something. You know that you can keep his interest by just making sure it's some sort of DNA thing. And Scott is pretty... Alright, he is not a villain. But he's always been a lot more anti-hero than people give him credit for. Like, when you compare him to Logan, he's like the most pure, squeaky clean villain ever. Well, pure, squeaky clean hero ever. Because he doesn't think killing is justified. He defends villains. He full on has made deals with villains in modern times just because the mutant population's that low. And yet, they dropped this. Alex and Scott both were manipulated by Sinister. Sinister cares deeply about them. He doesn't go out of his way to do this. He doesn't go out of his way to do this for anyone else, with the Summers brothers. He left his lab to save Alex from being possessed by one of his own marauders, even when there was someone sketchy in control of his DNA samples, and he knew that she might do something. That is how much Sinister cares about the Summers brothers. And he came to Scott in Alaska to tell him about the legacy virus, warn him about the legacy virus. And they completely drop it. Scott has enough affection. After the initial assault, he was following along behind Sinister, listening. He has this reasonable discussion with Sinister. And then it seems like they shunted that for the Hank Sinister comparison, and the fact that Hank is another person who's able to calmly talk to Sinister, but also has that sort of connection. And, all the build-up, including when Scott and Jean traveled to the past and saw how Sinister was, and saw how Sinister resembled Scott, and how, Alex kind of resembles Sinister's son who died, which, when you think about it, is why Sinister obviously has a pure bias for Alex. But there's so many little ticks and things that you note that means that Sinister was not as hands-off as he presents himself. He's pretty cold. He's not the Apocalypse Sinister by any means, and yes, I've read some Apocalypse Sinister because I recently read some X-Man stuff, who's the Apocalypse Futures version of Cable. But that one's not the same, because what you get from our Sinister, because Apocalypse Sinister doesn't feel like our Sinister, is you have to earn his affection. You get the small little glimpses of the man he was. He hasn't died yet. He's merely asleep. The scientist is the one who runs. But the man's still underneath. I had to hear this secondhand, but my friend read the comic where Sinister's only love interest died. Faye Livingstone. She was killed by Strife in this one comic. And Sinister tore apart the place after everyone left in his upset. He's like Scott. Or more like Scott's like him. He doesn't know how to show his affection, but on the other hand, he doesn't lack that affection. The only problem is there's no good place for it in modern times to have these two reconnect. Especially since Sinister's gone off the deep end. He doesn't have anyone to depend on. He used to have Threnody. Granted, she was kind of she was bad. she doesn't like Sinister, but at least he had her to talk to. Sinister not having anyone to talk to other than his own clones seems to have put him off the deep end. Gillian was one of the best ones to show a realistic Sinister there. But he's just like, God am I have made my own section of mutants in my own image. So he can't, he's gone so off the deep end that you'd either have to kill him to reset him, or you'd have to do the controversial thing of putting a supervillain in some sort of mental asylum. And the thing is, the X-Men can't reform every supervillain. So I'm not sure how they'd manage to rekindle this. Hence, I'm just venting about my frustration that they didn't explore this further. Because it's not realistic for that it was dropped. People try to interact with their shitty parents all the time. Even if, like, my dad tries to be close to my grandpa, and my grandpa abandoned them for the longest time. And it's just because he's eccentric, but he's not particularly bad. And Sinister actually is particularly bad, and there's that moral conflict. On the other hand, we've seen Scott in alternate realities work together with him, and we've seen that they can work together a little bit. And also, Scott's done the necessary thing. He's the leader. He's the war leader. He knows what he needs to do, and he'll do it even if he doesn't like it. So, they should have used Sinister more. And I'm sorry for that long pause, but it's crushing. They should have. They didn't. It was dumb of old Marvel. Especially since these two are so popular on their own. I'd like if they'd try to rekindle that. Like, maybe if they found... Like, they can't get Scott to work with Sinister because Magneto is on the team. And that causes a few problems, but I think it'd be interesting if they did find some way for a reconnection, at least through Alex, especially since Alex has had to work with Dark Beast. But I don't know, what are your thoughts? If you like my video, please click like, subscribe if you like what I'm saying, and I'll try to update more later.